The Hawk, the Hound, and the Butterfly. Chapter 3. Artemis. Artemis opened her eyes. She didn't remember falling asleep, couldn't remember what she'd been doing, or where she was going. She didn't know what day it was, or whether it was light or dark out. Everything she knew, or thought she knew, was like a faint echo in the distance, memories that must have belonged to someone else. She sat up with a jolt. Her head was pounding like it was in a vice, and she wished the room would stay still. She put her hands on the ground to steady herself. It was stone, cold and dusty, uneven and chipped from years of boots walking over it. The walls were stone too, except for the sides opposite her and to her left, which were metal bars that ran from the ground to the ceiling, confining her inside the room. No, this wasn't a room. This was a cell in a dungeon. Did that mean Artemis was a prisoner? But what had she done to deserve such punishment? Artemis rubbed her head, digging her thumbs into her temples. How did she get here? She was running. Her heart was beating so fast. The air was cool the faster she ran. She was being chased by something. Whatever it was, it had been relentless in its pursuit. A shiver ran through Artemis's spine, like a spider skittering down her back. She wasn't sure if it was from the cold, or because she was frightened. Maybe both. She stopped suddenly. Apollo had tripped. Apollo was there, her brother. She had wanted to help him, but he told her to run. Her legs wouldn't move. Something was stopping her. It spun around her as fast as lightning cracks across the sky. Her arms and legs felt like stone. Her eyes drooped and her head grew foggy. She called out to Apollo for help, but nothing came. Then everything went black. What happened to Apollo? Was he here somewhere too? Apollo? Artemis tried to speak. Her throat was dry and scratchy. She tried to swallow, but her mouth was too dry. Beyond the metal bars of her cell, she could see another room. 2 empty wooden chairs and a table sat to the right against the wall that adjoined to her cell. Opposite it, instead of the metal bars she had, was a small stone fireplace, the only light flickering from the smouldering embers within it. Behind the wall the fireplace was attached to was a passage. Artemis crawled to the edge of her cell but couldn't see where it led to. Artemis pulled her knees up against her chest and hugged them. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her nose twitched and her bottom lip quivered. She held them back for as long as she could, but the tears forced their way out. They streaked down her face, making the pounding in her head louder. Artemis hated that she was in this state. If only she could be as brave as her siblings were. They were all warriors, well trained, well admired. They would know what to do if they found themselves in this situation. There was a story Artemis used to read when she was little. A beautiful baby girl had been born to the king and queen, and eventually she grew into a beautiful young woman. One unfortunate day, an angry troll decided to make her his bride. He kidnapped her one night whilst she slept. The princess begged the troll to let her go, but he refused. He made her cook and clean every day until her soft hair grew wild and her fingers became calloused. When the handsome prince from the south, to whom she was betrothed, found out, he attacked the troll's lair. Before he could land the final blow, the princess begged him to stop. He had not recognized her at first, in her torn clothes, all covered in dirt, but he recognized her heart. The princess did not wish death to any living creature, so the prince banished the troll, and he whisked the princess off her feet and told her she'd never have to cook or clean another day in her life. Artemis wondered when a handsome prince was going to rescue her. She didn't know many because the war had forbidden travel between the lands, and the ones she did know she was related to. Artemis tucked her head into her knees and let out a sob. "Is he still sleeping?" a raspy voice said. Artemis looked up through bleary eyes, but could see nothing through the darkness. "Well, if she were, she certainly wouldn't be now, thanks to you," replied another voice that sounded like Artemis's uppity history teacher, Mr. Linus. The voices seemed to be coming from the other side of the bars, in the cell next door. Artemis rubbed her eyes. For a moment, she thought she could see a single figure dancing in the shadows. She took in a breath of air. It was stale and smoky. "Is someone there?" She tried to sound as strong and confident as her sister Athena, but her voice came out sounding like a squeaking mouse. "Some too," the raspy voice replied. "Shh, be quiet, you," the Mr. Linus voice said to the first. "It's all right, dear. We are here. Come closer. We don't bite." "I bite. I like to bite tasty things." A gnashing sound, like rocks clashing against each other, made Artemis jump. "Don't say things like that. You'll scare her." The voices began squabbling back and forth, haughty and high, raspy and low. Artemis pushed the back of her hand across her cheeks, erasing any signs of dampness, and shuffled closer to the bars. There was still only one figure that she could make out, but the two voices were quite distinct. The squabbling stopped. A pitter-patter of feet echoed through the room. The figure approached. "Ah, now we can see you better." Artemis thought she must have been in some kind of dream, but the pounding in her head had weakened a little. The creature before her was something stranger than she'd ever seen before. It had 2 heads, 4 arms, and 4 legs, all attached to a grey leathery body. It was as if 2 creatures had been fused together, but it wore a Hessian sack, so Artemis couldn't be sure. It did remind her of a creature. On one of her many bookshelves at home sat a tattered Species of the World book. It once had bright coloured drawings of obscure creatures from all over. She'd gone through it cover to cover many times when she was a child, but had moved on to more wordy books now. Between the pages of tigers and vultures was a species called the trowel. It bore a remarkable resemblance to the creature in front of her, only it didn't have 2 of everything. The right side of the creature had a head that was small and fat, and a nose that twitched like a rabbit. The arms and legs on the right, that seemed to be controlled by the right head, was short and thick. The other side of the creature was the complete opposite. The left had legs that were long, skinny sticks, which made it very difficult for the creature to walk, but somehow they managed. The left side's head looked like that of a rat, with its elongated face and pointed nose. The left side's eyes darted around the room, going from Artemis to the corner of the cell and back to Artemis. The creature squatted down behind the bars in front of Artemis. "Hello, dear," said the head on the right. "My name is Madge." Madge smiled with a warmth that somehow made the darkness not so frightening. "And I'm Jicklick," said the other head, pointing to itself. It grinned so wide that its face wrinkled up, and Artemis could count every tooth inside its mouth. There were 9. Artemis thought back to her Species of the World book again. The entry on trowels was on a light orange page with curvy lettering. It had said the trowel was a creature that dwelt in the volcanic regions of the continent, which is why it had thick leathery skin to protect it from the harsh, dry conditions of its habitat. They lived in communities made of several families, each family having upwards of 30 immediate members. So being that they are a family-orientated species, if the Species of the World book was to be believed, then surely they would only be hostile to those who posed a threat to their family, of which Artemis was not. But these two were no ordinary trowels. Artemis wondered how different they were. "Sorry about my brother's behaviour. He does not know the finer points of conversing," the one named Madge said. Artemis nodded. She eyed the creatures carefully, keeping her distance. "Don't be afraid, dear." Madge smiled that warm, welcoming smile again. She stepped closer to the bars that separated them, tugging Jicklick along. Artemis still sat wrapped in her arms, but the tears no longer fell. "I'm not afraid," Artemis said, her voice still shaky and weak, making her words doubtful. "I am," said Jicklick. He wrapped his arms around his shoulders and tucked his head in between them. "Why are you afraid?" Madge looked at her brother. He popped his head up. "Oh, not afraid. Hungry!" Jicklick nodded as though he was proud of himself for remembering the word. Madge sighed and shook her head. A smile crept up on Artemis. "Ah, now there's a pretty thing," Madge said. The smile grew wider. These two couldn't possibly be untrustworthy. They were friendly and kind and funny. Plus, they were also locked inside a cage. Artemis shuffled closer to the bars. "I'm Artemis," she said. "Pleasure to meet you, Artemis. I only wish it could have been under better circumstances." Madge motioned her hands around the room. Artemis nodded. Do either of you know where we are?" "We are trapped," said Jicklick, with wide eyes. He leapt forward, causing Madge to stumble, and began shaking the bars. Artemis flinched and shifted backwards. "Be quiet, you," Madge said. She slapped Jicklick on the back of his head. He jumped down from the bars and covered his head with his long, bony arms. Madge rolled her eyes as Jicklick turned away, sulking like a scolded child. "I'm afraid we don't," Madge said to Artemis. There was a sympathetic tone to her voice that caused Artemis to edge closer towards them. "We were out by the burning mountain, collecting stones and—" "Yes, rocks, my beautiful, tasty rocks," interrupted Jicklick. He was smiling now, and seemed to have gotten over being scolded at. Madge sighed. Indeed, Jicklick had a dreamy smile on his face like he was 1,000 miles away. "As I was saying, we were collecting stones when a shiny silver rock came out of nowhere, and it just started flying around us. Not a nice rock." Jicklick shook his head. "Not at all," Madge said, in what seemed to be the first thing that they agreed on. Something about a silver rock seemed so familiar to Artemis, but maybe not a rock, but something metal. Madge continued, "We tried to run away, but, well, it's a bit difficult under the circumstances." Madge flicked her eyes up at Jicklick in the space that connected them. "Madge was scared," Jicklick said. "Yes, well, that's understandable. Completely normal response. Anyway, we woke up here in this cell, and then not long after, I brought you in." "They? Who are they?" Artemis felt a lump in the pit of her stomach at the thought of not knowing what had happened to her while she was out of it. Madge and Jicklick looked at each other. An unspoken word passed between them. "Do you know who they are?" "Well, not personally," said Madge. "Bad men, evil men," said Jicklick. "They wore stone shirts that were the colour of a dark sky." Artemis's heart sank. "And the scratches, they had scratches," interrupted Jicklick. "Yes, markings, a sun or a star." Madge looked at Jicklick, who nodded. "A mace? A 7-pointed spiked mace?" Artemis didn't want it to be true. "Yes, that's right. I believe they called themselves Tekans," Jicklick answered. Artemis turned away from Madge and Jicklick. She started breathing in and out shallow, rapid breaths. Her body tingled all over. The Tekans were a brutal people. She'd seen it every afternoon when she'd sit out on the balcony off the study. There she could just see the city hospital. It was overflowing with wounded soldiers so much that they lined the streets outside. She'd even seen that brutality in the eyes of her own brother, even though he'd never admit that it affected him that way. "Are you okay, dear?" Artemis wasn't okay. She was scared, more scared than she'd ever been in her life. She took in a deep breath through her nose and slowly exhaled. I can't stay here," Artemis said. She rose to her feet. They were a little shaky, but Artemis grabbed onto the bars to keep herself up. "I have to get out of here. We have to get out of here." Artemis ran her fingers along the bars of the cell. There had to be a way. This place was old and not well maintained. It had to have a floor. She looked out into the room beyond the bars. Sparks flew out of the fireplace as a log crumbled. "But how will we get out?" Jicklick clung to the bars and tried to pry them open. "Are we sure that's the best thing to do?" Madge looked at Jicklick. "They could hurt us." "What do you think they'll do to us if we stay here?" Artemis replied. Madge sighed and slowly nodded. In the cell where Artemis stood, a metal bed hid in the corner with stained linen sheets on it. "But how will we get out?" Jicklick said, again, slightly louder. Artemis looked at all she had and looked over at what she needed. Thoughts and ideas swam through her mind. She sifted through them all. "I've got a plan,"